overwhelmingly beautiful, heartfelt welcome. Can you all hear me? This microphone might be moving as I move a lot. Rocky, you wanted to do a big production. I think you should be now advertising instead of the voice of Sports in Montana, the production of a biggest event, because you have done it. I want to thank everybody who's been involved in this wonderful event tonight. The Dream Team ladies, I'll tell you, they are fantastic, but every, and Rob Stanton, and my son, and every person, and I was today on a big radio show, the Big J. Everything is big in that big sky country. So I am grateful to be here. I have tweeted some time ago a statement with a nice picture. I said, I'm grateful to be alive. I am grateful to live in the United States. I am grateful to advocate forgiveness. And now I'm going to be very grateful to be here with you. My lecture is divided in 3 parts. Part 1, how I survived Auschwitz. Part 2, which is very, very important, the life lessons that I have learned from my very unusual life. And part 3, I don't think we will have time for it, questions and answers, but I will permit Rocky to decide, or Rob Stanton, if they want to go ahead with questions and answers. And at the end, I will sign books. I hope to have some time with some of you to take pictures. I don't know how much time, because there are about 3,000 to 4,000 people here, and that might take longer than I have here in Montana. Since I'm leaving tomorrow for the airport, and I need to get back to Indiana. My name is Eva Kor. I am a survivor of Auschwitz, a survivor of medical experiments conducted by Dr. Mengele. And now that I am 81 years old, I'm trying to survive old age. It was the dawn of an early spring day in 1944. Our cattle car train came to a sudden stop. We have been traveling in it for 4 days, about 100 people, and among them was my father, Alexander, age 44, my mother, Jaffa, 38, my older sister, Edith, age 14, my middle sister, Alice, age 12, and Miriam and I, identical twins who were only 10 years old. As soon as we stepped down from the cattle car onto a cement platform called the selection platform, my mother grabbed my twin sister and me by the hand. We were her youngest children, and she hoped that as long as she could hold on to us, that she could protect us. Everything was moving very fast. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of crying, a lot of yelling. I am 10 years old, and I'm standing on that cement platform. And in my childish curiosity, I looked around, trying to figure out what on earth is this place. And as I looked around, I realized that my father and 2 older sisters were gone. 10 minutes. I never saw them again. Holding on to mother for dear life, As a Nazi is running on that selection platform, and I want to just give you a little bit of impression of the selection platform and my opinion about it. A strip of land measuring 85 feet long by 35 feet wide. Millions of families were ripped apart from their loved ones forever. There is no other strip of land like that anywhere on the face of this earth. So a Nazi is running there yelling in German, twins, twins. We did not volunteer any information. We did not know what that place was and what worked here. He noticed us, approached my mother and demanded to know if we are twins. And my mother didn't know what to say. She asked, is that good? And the Nazi nodded yes, and my mother said yes. At that moment, another Nazi came, pulled my mother in one direction. We were pulled in the opposite direction. We were crying. She was crying. And all I really remember is seeing my mother's arms stretched out in despair as she was pulled away. I never even got to say goodbye to her. But I did not really understand that this would be the last time that we would see her. And all that took 30 minutes from the time we stepped down from the cattle car. Miriam and I no longer had a family, and we had no idea what would happen to us. We became part of a group of little girls, all twins. In our group, there were 13 sets of little girls between the ages of 2 and age 16. I am sure that on that long selection platform, there were little groups of twin boys, aged 2 to 16, and of course many other twins who were older and other people. But I was so traumatized by my abrupt separation from my family that I couldn't deal with anything except my own predicament. Our group, in addition to the 13 sets of little twin girls, there was one mother. Her name was Mrs. Chengeri, and she had twin daughters aged 7, just like Claire and Natalie. And she was my mother's friend. Our group was led to a huge building. We were ordered to undress, our clothes were taken away, and we sat naked for most of the day. At times, sitting there, I thought, this must not be happening to me. It must be a nightmare. And somehow, if I closed my eyes and opened them again, maybe the nightmare would disappear. But the nightmare did not disappear. It was late in the afternoon when our processing began. We were given short haircuts, we used to have braids. The mother's head was shaved. Our dresses were returned with a huge oil-painted red cross on the back, which meant we were part of medical experiments. And the mother was given striped prison uniforms. Then they lined us up for registration and tattooing. When my turn came, I decided to give them as much trouble as a 10-year-old could. 4 people restrained me, 2 women prisoners, and 2 Nazis. They heated a gadget with a needle at the end, and they heated the needle over the flame of a lamp. When the needle got hot, they dipped it into ink. And then they burned into my left arm, dot by dot, the capital letter A, dash 7063. Miriam became capital A, dash 7064. Auschwitz was the only Nazi camp that tattooed its inmates. My husband is a survivor of 4 years of Buchenwald. He does not have a tattoo. Once we were processed, we were marched throughout the camp, we arrived at our barrack, a wooden, modular horse barn, crude and filthy. I have never seen anything filthier in my life. The barrack was divided in two by a brick bench. On each side of the brick bench, there was a walkway, and then the 3-story high bunk beds. The bunk beds were covered with a thin straw mattress and a filthy blanket. Miriam and I were given a bunk bed on the bottom. We haven't slept or stretched out in 4 days because all we could do in the cattle car is lean against one another. There was no room to sit on the floor. So we thought maybe we could stretch out in our bunk beds and sleep. But human beings cannot function after such a traumatic day because I kept tossing and turning, but I could not fall asleep. And as I was doing that, I noticed something big and dark moving on the floor. I counted them and I got to 5. I jumped up screaming, "Mice! Mice!" A girl from the top bunk bed said, "Silly kid, these are not mice, they are rats. And you better get used to them because they are everywhere." So now we couldn't even try to go back to sleep. We went to the latrine, and as I entered the place, there on the filthy latrine floor were the scattered corpses of 3 children. I have never ever seen anybody dead before, but to me it became clear that children died in this place. So right then and there I made a silent pledge that I will do anything and everything within my power to make sure that Miriam and I shall not end up on that filthy latrine floor. From the moment I left the latrine, I did everything instinctively, and I did everything instinctively right. I never let any doubt or fear enter my mind. In my mind, I actually had an image of how Miriam and I might look when we would walk out of this camp alive. And I never let go of that image until the day we were liberated. Our daily routine, we waken up every morning by the shrieking sound of a whistle at 5 a.m. By 6 a.m. we were outside for roll call. Summer, winter, blizzard, it did not matter. And by the winter of 1944-45, my dress was filled with holes, and so were my shoes. We got no warm clothes. We didn't even have underwear. We didn't get jackets or sweaters. And for the life of me, I do not understand how we survived. Because I was just back in Auschwitz in January for the 70th anniversary with Ugg boots, with 2 layers of clothing plus a top coat, plus wrapped my head in a big hat, and I was freezing. So I do not understand how we survived 70 years ago. But that is the way. Once we were back in the barrack, Josef Mengele would come, Dr. Josef Mengele would come in every day except Sunday, and this is the way we knew it was Sunday. He came in to count us. He wanted to know every morning how many guinea pigs he had. Then he would leave and we would get breakfast. Breakfast at Auschwitz was brownish, bitter, lukewarm liquid, cold coffee, 0 calories. At noon, if we were in the barrack, we got a gooey stuff that looked like cream of wheat. I could not spoon it, nor could I swallow it. So I am sure it was not cream of wheat. And at night, we got a very dark piece of bread, but it tasted okay. And for a while, it filled my empty stomach. After 3 days in Auschwitz, I learned the routine, and I realized that at night, I could sleep, even though I was very hungry. But the long days without any food were agonizing. So I decided to save my bread at night for next morning. Next morning, my bread was gone, stolen by those huge rats. So I had a difficult decision to make every day. Should I eat my bread tonight and have something to eat tonight? Or should I gamble and maybe have some bread tomorrow morning? The Nazis knew how to keep the bread safe, because years later I learned that the people who went to work in the morning got their bread in the morning. But we were not even given that much help. So after breakfast, we would be taken for experiments. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we would be placed naked in a room for up to 8 hours a day. They would measure just about every part of my body, compare it to my twin sister, and compare it to Chuck. These experiments were not dangerous, but how would any of you cope if you had to stand or sit naked for 8 hours a day in order to live? The only way that I could cope with it is by blotting it out of my mind. On alternate days, on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we would be taken to another lab that I call the blood lab. There, they would tie both of my arms to restrict the blood flow, take a lot of blood from my left arm, and give me a minimum of 5 injections into my right arm. The content of those injections, we didn't know then, nor do I know today. The rumor was that they were germs, diseases, and drugs, and that can be a very good guess. After one of those injections, I became very ill with a very high fever, a fact I desperately tried to hide. Because the rumor in the camp was that anyone taken to the hospital never came back. Well, the next visit to the blood lab, they did not tie my arms for blood taking. Instead of that, they measured my fever, and I knew I was in trouble. I was taken to the hospital, which was another barrack, but this one was filled with people who looked more dead than alive. Next morning, Dr. Mengele came in with 4 other doctors. He never ever examined me. All he did, he looked at my fever chart and then he declared, laughing sarcastically, he said, "Too bad, she's so young, she has only 2 weeks to live." I knew he was right, but I refused to die. So I made a second silent pledge that I will prove Dr. Mengele wrong, I will survive and be reunited with my sister. For the following 2 weeks, I have only one memory. I remember crawling on the barrack floor because I no longer could walk. And I was crawling to reach a faucet with water because this barrack was not even allocated water. And as I was crawling, I would fade in and out of consciousness, and I kept telling myself, I must survive. I must survive. After 2 weeks, my fever broke, and I immediately felt a lot stronger and a lot better, and it took me another 3 weeks before the fever chart showed normal, and I was released and reunited with my twin sister and the other twins. But the happiness of our reunion was short-lived. Miriam looked very sick. She looked just like the living dead I left in the barracks. I could not understand what happened to her. And I asked her, what have they done to you? She said, I cannot speak about it. I will not speak about it. And Miriam and I never ever spoke about Auschwitz until 1985. In 1985, I asked Miriam, do you remember when I was taken to the hospital? She said, yes. I said, what happened to you? She said, well, I was kept in isolation with Nazi doctors studying me day and night, and they were waiting for something to happen. I don't know what it was because they didn't tell me, and I don't know if it happened or it didn't happen. But it was the same 2 weeks that Mengele said I would die. Would I have died? Miriam would have been rushed to Mengele's lab, killed with an injection to the heart. And then Mengele would have done the comparative autopsies. I was a diseased organ and she had the control, the healthy organs. I told her that I spoiled the experiment. I survived. From the Auschwitz Museum, I have learned that they have used 1,500 sets of twins in the experiments in Auschwitz. The estimated number of survivors is between 180 and 250 individuals. So very small percentage survived. Most of them died in the experiment. In normal life, you cannot take a set of twins, inject one twin with a disease, and that twin dies, you kill the other one, and then you do the comparative autopsies to see how the germs work. But in Auschwitz, everything was possible. So I asked Miriam, what happened to you after the 2 weeks were up? She said that she was taken back to the labs, injected with many injections that made her look very sick and feel very sick. After the war, she was always weaker than I was. And we knew that had to do something with the experiment. We lived in Israel when she got married in 1957, expected her first baby in 1960, and she developed severe kidney infections that did not respond to any antibiotic. Second pregnancy in 1963, the pregnancy got worse, and this time the doctors in Israel studied her, and they found out that Miriam's kidneys never grew larger than the size of a 10-year-old child. I begged her not to have any more children, because every pregnancy was a life crisis. But she didn't listen to me. She had a third child, and after her third child was born, her kidneys started to deteriorate, and nothing worked. By 1987, her kidneys failed. She had to go on dialysis or have a kidney transplant. She did not want to live on dialysis. I had a simple choice. I had 2 kidneys and 1 sister. So I donated my left kidney. We were a perfect match. But a year after the transplant, Miriam developed cancerous polyps in her bladder. At that hospital near Tel Aviv, they have had over 2,000 transplantees. All of them were given anti-rejection medication. None of them developed cancerous polyps. The doctors were puzzled, and they asked me if I could find the Auschwitz files so they could find out what was injected into her body that combined with the anti-rejection medication. We never found our files. We never found what was injected into our bodies. And Miriam died June 6, 1993. I will take you back to the camp because I want you to understand how does a 10-year-old child function in a place like that. It's completely differently than teenagers and grown-ups. When you travel with young children, under age 13, Sometimes they will nag you and ask you the question, when do we get there? And I want to explain to you why that is. It takes a lot of energy for a child under age 13 to function in the here and now. Children cannot project forward, nor can they project backward. That is the reason that when I was in Auschwitz, I didn't become stupid suddenly. Yet, I thought that the whole world was a big concentration camp. That everybody in the world lived like island in miserable conditions, without family or parents, starving to death day and night, and surrounded by guns. Nothing really changed for me until end of August of 1944, when suddenly an airplane appeared over the skies of Auschwitz. It was flying very low. I could see the American flag on one of the wings. That gave me hope that somebody was trying to free us. And hope in Auschwitz was in very short supply. The air raids continued and increased until end of November of 1944, by which time it felt like a continuous battlefield. I could sense it in every ounce of my being that this cannot last much longer, that someday soon we would be free and we would go home. And we even developed a daily slogan that someday soon we will be free and go home. All the experiments, of course, stopped, but we did not know how that would happen. And nothing much happened until early January of 1945, when the Nazis told us one evening, everybody out of the barracks, we are taking you deep into Germany to protect you from the fighting. Well, at age 10 plus, I did not like the Nazis when they were winning the war. They were really mean. And I figured that now that they are losing the war, they would be even meaner. So I didn't want to be near them. We decided to stay in our barrack and not go out. Besides that, it was so cold outside, and at least inside we were a little bit protected. Next morning we woke up, we opened the barrack doors, and we looked around. All the guard towers were empty. All the Nazis were gone. We were on our own. And as I learned years later, from the 150,000 inmates in the camp, only 8,500 remains. The grown-ups cut the barbed wires so we could roam throughout the camp and trying to organize, and in camp language that meant stealing from the Nazis. But I will call it organizing. Now, if you ever are in a similar situation, it's called organizing. Otherwise, it's stealing. So let's be honest. We needed to organize water, bread, and blankets. One day I was in the kitchen with about 200 other survivors. This kitchen was huge. It was supplying food for 5,000 inmates at a time. We found a lot of bread. So we loaded up with as many loaves as we could carry. Then we heard the strange sound of a car. No one had cars but the Nazis, so we went outside trying to investigate what happened. Well, there was an army vehicle, with 4 Nazis, like a jeep. The 4 Nazis jumped up, took out their machine guns, and they began spraying bullets in every direction. The last thing I remember was the barrel of the gun about 3 feet from my head. And then I faded away. I have no idea how long I was out, but when I woke up, I tried to feel my arms, I could, my legs, I could. Then I looked around and I realized that I was buried among hundreds of people. I reached out and touched the little girl next to me, and her body was ice cold. This is when I realized that I must have had a guardian angel, and I fainted long before the bullets hit me. I ran back to the barrack where Miriam was watching our little belongings. In Auschwitz, you never left anything unattended. I told her what happened. We were very sad that so many people were killed so close to liberation. Then we wondered, why did the Nazis come back? That was not good news. When we found out in the middle of the night, they blew up the gas chamber, the Canada building, the crematorium, and they were trying to eliminate all the evidence. Our barrack was on fire. We could not stand the heat, so we had to walk outside. When we walked outside, the same 4 Nazis were waiting for us, ordered us to march. Anyone who couldn't walk fast enough was shot on the spot. Another 600 people were murdered. When we arrived in Auschwitz I, and Auschwitz I is a much smaller camp, we were racing for the 2-story buildings for safety. For the next 9 days, we arrived in Auschwitz I, January 18, 1945. Heavy fighting was raging in the area. The Nazis were not willing to give up, and the Allies were outside the city limits. My biggest problem in Auschwitz I had nothing to drink. And one day, in sheer despair, I went to the nearby river. I broke the ice. I lowered the container tied to a string. And when I looked up across the river bank, I saw a little girl, my age. She was dressed in beautiful, clean clothes, braided hair with ribbons, and she was carrying a school bag. That was the first time I realized that in this big, mixed up world, there were children who looked like children and went to school. She looked at me too. I was dressed in ragged clothes, swarming with lice, and the only school I was attending was the School of Survival. A few days later, it was very, very quiet, eerie. And we thought, maybe this will be the day we will be free. But we didn't know how that would happen. It was late in the afternoon of January 27, 1945. It was a Saturday at about 4:30. A woman ran into the barrack yelling at the top of her voice, "We are free! We are free!" Wonderful. Miriam and I looked down from the 2nd story to see what it meant. Could we see something? Why did she yell that we are free? We couldn't see anything. We went downstairs. It was snowing heavily. I was there probably half an hour trying to adjust my eyes to the snowing scene, and then at a distance I could see lots of people. And they were all wrapped in white camouflage raincoats. They were smiling from ear to ear. And the most important part of them was that they didn't look like the Nazis. We ran up to them. They gave us chocolate, cookies, and hugs. And this was my first taste of freedom. For me to realize that Miriam and I were alive, that we have triumphed over unbelievable evil, that my little promise to myself, that first night in the latrine, became a reality. That was an unbelievable experience. I want to thank you for listening to my shortened version of my local life story. I Talk, I lecture a lot. Last year it was 176, 2 years ago 273. Today's lecture, I think it's lecture 52 this year. So I speak a lot. Now why? Because I have learned some very important lessons in my life, and because I learned them as lessons in my life, I call them life lessons. And I want to share them with you. I think particularly young people would be able to use it. And I'm so glad to see so many young people in the audience. Because life lesson number one, never ever give up on yourself or on your dreams. Growing up is very hard. I know, I remember. And even if you were born in the United States, and even if you have loving parents, which is, I think, would be the greatest thing, if we could somehow figure out that every child born in the world has a loving, at least one loving parent, preferably two, we would solve most of the world problems. And even if your loving parents are very wealthy and they can buy you the latest designer jeans with holes in them. I don't know why that is so important, but I know it is. Even then, every single one of you young people wonders, how on earth do I fit into this big, big, mixed up world? Will I be able to accomplish in life what I set out to do? I want you to remember that there is always hope after despair. And there is always a tomorrow after disaster. And if we don't give up on ourselves and on our dreams, we can accomplish anything we set out our minds to do. I had no idea how to survive Auschwitz. I tried different things. And here I am, 70 years later, at Billings, Montana, telling you my story. Life lesson number two, prejudice. Prejudice was one of the reasons that Hitler used successfully and was able to rise to power. And as I look around in the world today, sadly, prejudice is rampant. And I will confess to you that even I am prejudiced. I am not prejudiced against any race, religion, or ethnic group. But I don't really like, and I don't know why, maybe because I am 81 years old and very old-fashioned, but I don't like sloppy clothes. I arrived in the United States 55 years ago. I used to dress up nicely, once my children were born, dress them up and go downtown and have a nice day. Nobody was sloppy in those days. I even remember when my daughter was attending elementary school all the way to junior high. She was wearing low ties and nice dresses. Today, I don't know what people wear, but I look at young students, junior high and high school, and my goodness, what I see. They are wearing every color of the rainbow. Some of these young girls have very low-cut blouses. They want to flaunt what they have or what they wish they had. I don't know. That idea in the United States that young girls have to look sexy, I tell them, you go to school not to check each other's outfit out in the morning, but to improve your mind. And if I ruled the world, I would put all students from age 6 to age 18 in uniform. And I know that teachers approve of it because checking those dress codes is a nightmare and it always has problems. So I don't like guys with ponytail. I don't like tattoos and body piercings. And then somebody has tattoos down here, right? Well, we are not going to check. I'm too busy. But I want to really explain, why would anybody, please ask yourself, why would you want to put ink in your body that couldn't do anything good in your body? It doesn't belong there. If it did, you would be bored with it. I know there's a fad, everybody thinks you are so nice with tattoos. Even the movie stars, don't go and emulate the movie stars. Look at Miley Cyrus. How on earth would anybody want to emulate her? About 16 years ago, I was invited to lecture at a local high school. And I'm heading to the auditorium. In front of me were 3 16-year-old young men with very baggy pants. The crotch was the height of the knee. They were holding the pant up with one hand as the bottoms were cleaning the hallway. And I was walking behind them when one of them dropped the book. And then he had the audacity to bend down and pick it up. I saw places that were never found. I was so embarrassed, I had to turn away. I have been lecturing 21 years. I have never seen anything like that. And then I got upset because this happened in my school district, supported by my tax money. So I went up to the teacher who invited me and I told him what happened, and I told him these 3 young boys with a baggy pants looked like bums. And I said, why would anybody want to look like a bum? They probably are drug addicts. I mean, why? And the teacher told me, no, they are very good students. And they have never ever used any drugs. That I was shocked. There goes my theory, right? So I decided from that day on to try to take the time to get to know a person before I pass judgment on them. I am trying I don't like these things. Let's go. We are not going to go with liking it. I'm just not passing judgment. So I'm trying to eliminate prejudice from my life, one person at a time. Life lesson number 3. I have forgiven the Nazis. I have forgiven everybody. Could you forgive people who have murdered your family and who were out to kill you? And if the answer is no, can I change what happened? Now, nobody, no matter how hard they try, we cannot change what happens. What happens is history, and that's the way it is. And I was a very, very good victim up to 21 years ago, about so. If anybody would have asked me if I am willing to forgive the Nazis, I would have told you to find a really good psychiatrist and have your head examined. Nothing really changed until Miriam died. I came home from a real estate open house. There was a message on my answering machine and to inform me that Miriam died. I immediately called Israel and I told my brother-in-law that I was going to catch the first flight because I wanted to attend her funeral and bury her. I have never, ever buried any member of my family. Such a simple human gesture. But my brother-in-law said, we cannot wait for you. Israel is 7 hours ahead and the funeral is in 10 hours. There is no way you can make it. So I was left with a lot of pain. I would wake up many nights suffocating, just the way Miriam died because her lungs were filled with cancer. I knew I would do something in her memory, and 2 years after her death, I opened Candace Holocaust Museum. A month after Miriam's death, unrelated to her death, I received a telephone call from a professor at Boston College who said to me, Eva, I have heard you speak about Nazi medicine. They think just because I survived experiments, I am an interesting example of how medicine should not be practiced. And he said, I am doing one of those conferences and I want you to come to Boston and lecture to some doctors. I said, I love to lecture to doctors. And he said, why is that? I said, well, I go to the doctor, they tell me I'm too fat, I eat the wrong food, I don't exercise enough, and after they chew me out, I have to pay them. So now I would like to tell the good doctors what they do wrong, because in my opinion, doctors do plenty of things wrong. And after I choose them out, I look forward to them paying me. Dr. Michalczyk from Boston College said, okay, but when you come to Boston, it would be really, really nice if you could bring with you a Nazi doctor. Shocked at such a request, I immediately blurted out, where on earth do you think I can find one of those guys? Last time I looked, they are not advertising in the yellow pages. So he said to me, okay, think about it, maybe you come up with some kind of an idea, and I did. Next day, I remembered the last project that Miriam and I worked on was a documentary done by a German television, where they interviewed about 34 of the Mengele twins. And in that documentary that we finished in March of 1992, there was a Nazi doctor from Auschwitz. His name was Hans Munch. He was a friend of Mengele's, but he was not my doctor. I immediately faxed a letter to Germany telling them that Miriam died, and would they please give me Dr. Munch's telephone number in the memory of Miriam. And they did. We contacted Dr. Munch, invited him to the Boston conference. He said he was not willing to go to Boston, but he was willing to meet with me at his house near Munich, where he would give me a videotape interview that I could take to the Boston conference. You have no idea how scared I was as I began preparing myself for a trip to meet a Nazi doctor. But I remembered about Nazi doctors. I really didn't want to experience again. But I was curious. Maybe this Dr. Munch knew something about our experiments. And I was curious. why was he willing to meet with me? We arrived at his house. He treated me with the utmost respect, kindness, and consideration, but told me he knew nothing about our experiments because Mengele clearly stated that the twins' experiments were top secret and he couldn't talk about it. He gave me a good interview for my Boston conference, and then out of the blues, I never thought about it or planned it. I heard myself say, Dr. Munch, do you know anything about the operation of the gas chambers in Auschwitz? And he immediately said, this is my problem. This is the nightmare that I live with every single day of my life. And when I'm describing the operation of the gas chamber, people would be told as they arrived on the cattle cars that they are going to take a shower. The shower room was clean, polished, they would even spread perfume. So people felt really comfortable. Once the shower room was packed, the doors would close hermetically. Dr. Munch was outside looking through a peephole. The gas did not come from the shower heads. Zyklon B looks like pellets of white gravel. They were stored in canisters. A hatch opened in the roof. The canisters were opened outside and dropped from the roof through the opening. They fell to the floor. Operated like dry ice, so the gas was rising from the floor. As the gas was rising and people were suffocating, they were trying to get away from the rising gas and climbing on top of each other, forming a little mountain of intermingled bodies. The people who were the strongest in the crowd ended up on the top of the pile. And Dr. Munch, as he was looking through his peephole, when the people on the top of the pile stopped moving, he knew that everybody was dead, and he would sign one single death certificate. No names, just the number of people that were murdered, anywhere from 500 to 3,000. I have never, ever heard about that before. I have been dealing with the Holocaust since 1978. This was 1993. Not in any documentary, not in any book, not in any field or lecture. And I told him immediately, this was very important information, that I wanted him to come with me to Auschwitz, because I was going to Auschwitz for the 50th anniversary of the liberation of the camp in 1995, and I wanted him to sign a document, just what he told me, but I wanted it signed by the ruins of the gas chamber and in the company of witnesses. So years later, people couldn't say he didn't sign it. He immediately said to me, I would love to do that. I didn't know it was going to be that easy. I got back to Terre Haute, Indiana, very excited that I was going to have an original document signed by a Nazi describing the operation of the gas chamber. So, if I ever met people who said the Holocaust didn't happen, or there were no gas chambers, I could say that original document signed by a Nazi and shove it in their face. I cannot explain to you because I don't really understand it, but I wanted to thank this Dr. Hans Munch for his willingness to document the gas chamber. Now, how on earth do you thank a Nazi doctor? I didn't know where to look, and I did not want to tell anybody about it, because even to me it sounded strange. And I knew if I shared my thoughts with my family or friends, they would convinced me not to do it, and I didn't want anybody to convince me of it. I went to the local Hallmark shop, and I went to the thank you section, thank you cards, and I started reading card after card after card for 2.5 hours. 2 ladies came up to me, "You've been reading those cards for a long time." I said, "Yes." "Are you finding what you are looking for?" I said, "Not really." "Well, what are you looking for? Maybe we can help you find it." I said, No, thank you very much." I left the card shop, but I could not give up my idea of finding a meaningful gift for this Nazi doctor. So I went back to my life lesson number 1. Never ever give up when you have an idea, or on your life or on your dreams. And for the next 10 months, while I was cooking, cleaning, doing the laundry, or driving the car, when my mind wasn't too busy, I kept asking myself, how do I thank this Nazi doctor? What can I give this Nazi doctor? Lots of ideas popped into my head. None seemed appropriate until 10 months later, the following idea. How about a letter of forgiveness from me to Dr. Munch? I knew immediately that this was a very meaningful gift for Dr. Munch. But what I discovered for myself was life-changing. I discovered that I had the power to forgive. No one could give me that power, and no one could take it away. It was all mine to use it in any way I wished. Now, I didn't know how to write a letter of forgiveness to a Nazi, so it took me another 4 months. Finally, I liked what I wrote, but then I was concerned about my spelling. I said, if somebody read this letter, I would be embarrassed. My spelling in English is atrocious. So I called my former English professor to correct my spelling. She got very enthusiastic. We met about 3 times. And third time she said to me, Eva, that's very nice. You forgive this Dr. Munch. But your problem is really with Dr. Mengele. I tried to debate that issue. She said, just do me a favor. When you go home tonight, pretend that you are talking to Dr. Mengele and telling him that you forgive him. Because what I want you to find out, how would you feel if you actually could do it? Okay, I said, I'll try. When I finished saying, you monster, you the worst human being on the face of this earth, you no good, but in spite of it, I forgive you. I said, wow, that feels really good, that I can forgive the God of Auschwitz. Mengele was God of Auschwitz, and there was nothing he could do. It made me feel that I even had power over Mengele. I wasn't hurting anybody, so why couldn't I do it? And if I forgave Mengele, the worst of them, I decided to forgive everybody who has ever hurt me. So this is the way we arrived in Auschwitz. In 1995, Dr. Munch came with his children and granddaughter. I went to Auschwitz with my son, who is here, my daughter. Dr. Munch signed his document, I read and signed mine, and I immediately felt that all the pain I carried around for 50 years was lifted from my shoulder, that I was no longer a victim of Auschwitz, nor was I a prisoner of my tragic past. I was free of Auschwitz and I was free of Mengele. I must explain to you, my forgiveness has nothing to do with the perpetrator. It does not have anything to do with any religion. And in some way, I feel that if people attach it to a religion and you advocate it, if many other people are a different religion, they feel that does not apply to them. So I think it's limiting. It has nothing to do with anybody except the whole idea that every victim on the face of this earth has the human right to be free from what life, society, or other people imposed on them. And it is amazing how well it can work. Now, about 2 years ago, I met with a Holocaust scholar, and I called in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to know that, in my opinion, Washington, D.C. is filled with a lot of big shots. In all levels, in all endeavors. And he is a very big organizer and policymaker in Holocaust issues. He came up to me and gave me a hug and a kiss, and we are not kissing cousins. And I was kind of taken aback. I said, "Oh, you accept my forgiveness ideas?" He said, "Eva, you do not understand it. In Jewish tradition, the perpetrator must repent and ask for forgiveness." I said, "That's interesting. Now let's assume that Hitler, Mengele, Goebbels, Himmler, Hus, any of those big shots, they're alive today. Do you think they would repent and ask for forgiveness?" Oh, he said, "Absolutely not." I said, "Well, where does it leave me? If they don't repent and ask for forgiveness, I cannot forgive. Does it mean that I must remain a victim for the rest of my life?" He didn't answer. I said to him, "I refuse to be a victim. Actually, in my opinion, my forgiveness is 180 degrees opposite the Jewish tradition of forgiveness. Because if you have to wait for the perpetrator to repent and ask for forgiveness, then the victim is still controlled by the perpetrator. That's absurd. Why would anybody want to give a molester still power over their life? Because that's what I hear. If so-and-so would only apologize. I said, please don't give them that power. Forgiveness, you don't need anybody's approval, acceptance, or permission. It is the most beautiful part of it that you can do it alone. It works, and it liberates, it heals, and it's tremendously empowering for any person to realize that they have some power over their life, particularly if they have lived as victims for years. So, anger, if we look around in the world, you see anger, and I know that Bob Stanton students studying genocide, deal with genocide. Anger, any person who is angry can create war. People who are very angry, usually I call them a seed for war. On the other hand, people who forgive are at peace with themselves and the world. Therefore, I call forgiveness a seed for peace. And I need everybody's help. If any of you in this audience or anybody who hears me is angry because they have been wronged and victimized, take a piece of paper, a pen, and start writing a letter to the person or people who have hurt you. At the end, you must write the word, "I forgive," and mean the word, "I forgive." And if it works for you, pass it on to somebody else, because I need everybody's help to help me sow those seeds of peace throughout the world. Today I am going to add a fourth life lesson. For years I used to say to children, if you have parents, when you go home tonight, please give them an extra hug and an extra kiss. For us children who had no parents to hug and kiss. And give you extra hug and kiss to your grandparents also. And you parents, when you see your children, please give them an extra hug, an extra kiss. For many children, even today in the world, you know how many young people come up to me and say, I have no one to hug and kiss. That is a tragedy in the United States. How many children with divorced parents or parents on drugs or who knows, that they have no one to hug and kiss. So, I would like to call my son out, and I would like to give him an extra hug and an extra kiss. Congratulations, you have survived my lecture.